Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I'm having some tech issues this morning, so we're going to see exactly what we can do, what we can't do. This presentation might be much more interesting if I just give it off the top of my head. Not sure that you will enjoy it as much, but we will see. So I appreciate Dr. Pink introducing me, and I am incredibly happy to be here on the campus of GRCC to talk to you all a little bit about, pursuing justice in the digital age. I'm just going to talk to you for a couple of minutes back and forth, and then I really want to get your questions and have an actual dialogue. You have to excuse me, I'm a little under the weather, so if I'm giving you Morgan Freeman realness, I ask that you bear with me. So let me give you a little bit of introduction as to who I am and what I've done on social media. For me, it started in, January, February of 2014. At that time, the rapper DMX was scheduled to fight the killer of Trayvon Martin, whose name I don't use. And this was going to be a celebrity boxing match, and all of the money was supposed to go to charity or to the Martin Fulton Foundation. And of course, as you can imagine, Trayvon Martin's family wanted absolutely nothing to do with this, and I thought it was a bad idea for about 50 different reasons. And so I started the hashtag Stop the Fight, and it was short, meaningful, to the point. You knew exactly where I was trying to go without knowing anything more. So I did that on Twitter, which is my social media platform of choice, and another Black woman started a petition for Stop the Fight. And she got tens of thousands of people to sign up, saying that they were against this fight happening. So the promoter of the fight actually called me directly, and we had a conversation, and I used all of the lawyerly skills that I had accumulated over the past 20 years to impress upon him why this was a bad idea. And so, in fact, 2 or 3 days after we had that phone conversation, he stopped the fight. So we were successful. So that was my first foray. That was about February, March 2014. 6 months later, on August 9th, 2014, I was on Twitter. And I saw a tweet that said, oh my goodness, I think they just killed somebody outside my apartment. So attached to that tweet was a picture of a body laying in the street. It was Mike Brown. And then I saw more tweets like that, and more tweets, and this city called Ferguson that I'd never heard of before. And there were actually over 1,000 tweets on Twitter before any news outlet picked up the news that an unarmed kid had been killed in Ferguson, Missouri. So that was sort of my second foray. I wasn't at that time able to travel down to Ferguson, so what I did was use my platform on Twitter to help rally and galvanize and mobilize people and connect the people who were already there on the ground and those people who were attempting to get there. So when we found out that the police had started to use tear gas, we were telling people, okay, don't use water to sort of douse the burning, use milk. Right? When the police were cracking down in one particular area and so the protest was being moved to another, I was able to use my platform at that time to say to them, okay, this is where we are now, everybody move this way. Again, I want to impress upon you that I had at that time less than 10,000 followers. So it wasn't a huge amount. It definitely wasn't the insane, obscene number that I have now. So that was number 2. And then number 3, again, about 4 or 5 months later, in January of 2015, I was getting ready for work, as I did every day. This particular day, the Oscar nominations were being announced on a morning program. And so I was getting dressed in the family room, which is a little weird for me. But Chris Hemsworth, the guy that plays Thor in the Avengers series, was the person that was doing the announcements. So Thor was in a suit, and I needed Thor on the biggest screen in the house in high definition. So I'm half dressed, in my family room, sort of listening, sort of drooling at Thor. And it struck me that category after category, both in front of and behind the camera, all of the nominees were incredibly homogenous. They were 90% white. And then even in the mixed gender categories, like Best Director, Best Cinematographer, they were all male, or mostly male. And so I took to Twitter, and I tweeted one thing: Oscars so white, they asked to touch my hair. Now, any black woman in the room knows exactly what I mean by that, right? Because there's some kind of erotic, exotic fantasy about black women's hair because the texture is different or whatever. I don't know what that is, but apparently people love to touch black women's hair. So that was it, one tweet, and then I went back upstairs and got ready for work. Now again, the Oscars for me were like the Super Bowl. I pre-gamed, I made special snacks, I watched the red carpet, I watched the actual show, I watched the Fashion Awards show the next day, the whole thing. So this was a big deal. But again, just like you all in the audience today, I was just a moviegoer. I didn't have, connections to Hollywood. I had not at that time met Ava DuVernay or John Boyega. All of that would come later. I was just like you. So I finished getting ready to work. I go on to work. I check in around lunchtime, and Oscars So White is trending internationally. I had gone viral again. Now, I had made a particularly snarky, petty tweet, right? And so that's how people were running with it. So it was, Oscars so white, they wear Birkenstocks in the wintertime. Oscars so white, they have a perfect credit score, right? And so it wasn't until a couple of days later that the conversation changed to something much more substantial about the lack of diversity and inclusion in Hollywood. And so that's where we are today. What I know is that between the day that I tweeted Oscars So White in middle of January 2015 and the day of the Oscars actual award ceremony, about 6 weeks later, Oscars So White, the phrase, the hashtag, had been used over 700,000 times because of one tweet. That's the power that we have in social media, right? And so now here we are, 4 years later, and what we've seen is some incremental change, but it's not enough. So the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, for example, has now promised, guaranteed, committed to double the number of people of color and the number of women in the Academy by 2020. So why is that important? The Academy members are the ones who nominate the films, right? And I've always said that films should be nominated and should win based on merit, not based on, who's in front of the camera, who's behind the camera, who's owed an Oscar, hello, Leo DiCaprio, who had a body of work, but this one may not be their best work. So, why did Al Pacino win for Hoo-Ah, Scent of a Woman, and not win for Godfather, right? So we have these conversations, and having people who are in the Academy makes a difference because we all operate from our own frames of reference, right? So if I go see a movie like Girls Trip, I'm going to have a different experience than an older white male does when he goes to see Girls Trip. Not better, not worse, just different. So we need to have a whole bunch of different people in the Academy to respond to various movies, right? Because he may not even go see Girls Trip and not know that it was a great movie. And I may not go see Dunkirk because I'm not into war films, right? So those are my experiences with social media. And what does that mean for you all? Again, what I will say to you is that you don't have to be famous. You don't have to have a bazillion followers on the gram or on Twitter or on Facebook. I don't know if anybody uses Facebook. But you do have to be smart about the way that you work on social media. So if you're interested in doing the work, what you must do, if you want to start a campaign, start a movement, there are no guarantees, right? So we can't guarantee. I know at this point, because I've been in the game for a while, that there are ways that one can pushed a hashtag along further so that there's a better chance that it goes viral, but there's still no guarantees. But when you make a hashtag, again, like the few that I've created, you want it short, you want it to the point and easily understandable. You want it to be consistent with your hashtag, right? So if you are in class 5 days a week, 4 days a week, and you want to start a campaign, schedule your tweets so that you're there, your tweets are still there even when you're in class or you're studying for finals. What I'll also say is that I think that social media is one tool of many in the arsenal for the race to justice. It is not the only tool by far. It's very rare that you can make substantive change without doing more than just social media. I was able to do it with Oscar So White, but I really feel like that's a flash in the pan. Like I was never out in LA with my billboard saying, you know, Oscar So White or what have you. Everything was done online. But if we look back to the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, it uses a myriad of techniques to be effective. So at the same time that I'm on social media helping folks out, there are boots on the ground. And that's the way it has to be if you're attempting to pursue justice in the social media age. It just has to be. You know, we talk about MLK and we're here today to commemorate his life. And you know, one of the things that he said is a riot is the language of the unheard. Right? And people sort of forget, in the later years of MLK's life, he was pretty radical, right? He started off on the nonviolence tip, and that was fantastic. But you know, as they were threatening the life of him and of his family, he saw how many people were being injured. He sort of moved. He shifted. The pendulum swung a little bit, so that he was in fact talking about active protest and fighting back. And people, I think, like to sanitize his history, make him, you know, this prince of nonviolence, when in fact he was like, okay, if there's an issue, then we need to take it to the people and make it heard. In fact, you know, when he was assassinated, MLK was just beginning the Poor People's Campaign, which Reverend Barber is now starting up again. And one of the reasons why he was doing that and why it was so successful is that the Poor People's Campaign was not just a binary issue. It was not just black and white. It also had to deal with all poor people, regardless of race. And that's when he really became dangerous to the FBI, which called him the most dangerous person in the country, because he was appealing to people outside of himself, right? Outside of his group. So what does it mean for you all? You have to find your tribe, right? And whoever that is, you have to find your cause. What I would ask you to do is to commit to service. You know, today is supposed to be a day of service, but I think we all need to commit to consistent service on whatever plane that is for you. You know, if you are all about the environment, then go do that. If you are all about LGBT plus rights, then go do that. If you are all about diversity and inclusion in the entertainment industry, go do that. Because they all lead us on the path to justice for all of us. And if you are not in one of those marginalized communities, right, you can still act as an ally. And that's sort of the buzzword, and I kind of hate it. Because ally to me says, it's passive, right? The ally says, oh my God, things are so hard for you. And I don't know what to do, but I'm gonna sit here and hold your hand and cry. Okay, that's cool for about 2-3 minutes, right? But what we need to be, all of us, are accomplices, not allies. Allies are passive. Accomplices are active. Accomplices say, oh my God, it's so bad for you. Let's sit here and cry for a moment, okay? And then I'm done with the crying. I'm going to use my privilege to stand in the gap for you to ensure that you can get the work done that you need to be done, right? And we all have privilege of certain kinds. So me being an able-bodied, cis, hetero, black woman means that I have privilege over those who have a disability, right? I have privilege over those who are in the LGBT plus community. It's easier for me as a straight woman than it is for a queer woman, right? And so it's my responsibility to stand in the gap for the LGBT plus community, to listen, to put my head down, to do the work, to not expect a cookie or a reward or a gold star or a safety pin, don't get me started, or any of that, right? The whole safety pin movement was cute for about a day and a half, right? And that whole thing, if you're not aware, was people who self-identified as allies said that they were going to wear a safety pin on their coat or their shirt to indicate when that they were there to help others, right? The issue is, if I'm on the subway and I'm being accosted or I'm being harassed by someone, I, as the victim or potential victim, should not have to scan the crowd to find a safety pin, right? You, as an ally or an accomplice, should just stand up and say, hey, leave that woman alone. You should step in regardless of whether you're wearing a piece of metal on your shirt. So there's a difference, right? You have to be active. You have to be an accomplice. So what I think is that we all have a job to do, right? MLK talked about the arc of the moral universe being long, but bending toward justice. And I would submit to you that we're not as far along on the arc as we should be, right? What we see is that segregation in our communities is just as bad, if not worse, as it was back when MLK was alive, right? The school system is still having the same issues that it did. LGBT plus people are still being persecuted just because of who they love, right? So what's really changed in the past 50 years? I don't know, right? It's tough sometimes. But I also know that we just had our first Black president, and that would not have happened had it not been for the work of MLK. So now we have somebody totally different who, God help us all. But what we need to do is take those incremental moments, those little signs of progress, just as I do with Oscar So White, and just as you do every time you get a quiz or a test back before you actually take the midterm or the final, we need to celebrate those little things that take us just a step further. What I would also say to you is that the work of pursuing justice is difficult and unforgiving and taxing. It's just rough all over. And so it is imperative that you practice consistent and unapologetic self-care. So what does that mean? If you're in college, you may not have as much disposable income as somebody else. So if I need a self-care day, that may mean that I'm going to get a massage or a facial or something like that, or a new pair of shoes. It's almost always a new pair of shoes. But for you, it may mean that you go to that one spot in the library that you think that nobody else knows about, and you veg out for the rest of the day, right? Or you get together with your friends and you binge something on Netflix all week long. Or you go home unexpectedly because you really need your auntie's fried chicken. Whatever that thing is that restores you, you need to ensure that you're doing that, because we cannot continue the work of moving toward justice if our well runs dry. So if you think about when you fly in a plane, and I'm on planes all the time, and they always say, if the oxygen mask drop down, put it on yourself first and then put it on your friend. And that always seemed like really selfish to me. But then you think about it, I truly cannot help someone else if I have run out of steam, right? If I no longer have air. And so it is not selfish, but required that you ensure that you are where you need to be before you attempt to help someone else, right? I don't want somebody coming into the struggle that's only half there, that's only half full, because I know that they're going to peter out relatively quickly. I need to know that the person with me is at 100%, right? And then you plug in your battery and you get more juice and you recharge through self-care. So I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say, and since I'm doing this off the top of my head, it's really just out there. But what I would love to do is continue the conversation, but with you. So can I ask if okay, we're doing a mic thing. Can I ask if there are questions from anybody in the audience? Don't be shy, we've got time.
Let's not be shy. Okay, questions? Right there, okay.
How do you combat things in smaller groups, such as family, who might be dealing with issues like racism or phobia in the family?
It's an excellent question, because I think that the hardest work that we do with respect to justice and freedom and liberation is the work that we have to do with the people closest to us, right? So if you're going home for Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, and you know that racist Uncle Charlie is going to be there, or homophobic Aunt Sarah is going to be there, then it's tough. And what I recommend that you do is operate outside of your emotions, right? Because when you start to get emotional, everything shuts down. You can't think, I tend to tear up when I get really, really angry. And it's a horrible thing. Like, I wish there was something I could do about it, because then I become the girly thing and it's just like an emotional thing. And that's not it, because I know I can still I can still knock you down. So what I do is operate from a place of fact, right? So if I'm talking about Oscar So White, what I know, and I get pushback, like, oh, well, why can't you, the NBA is so black. I get that one a lot, so what's the big deal? Or in the year that 12 Years a Slave won, about 13% of the winners were people of color, and since black people are 13% of the population, what's the big deal? So the issue there is I can now operate from a place of fact, right? Because I know my stuff, and that's part of it. It's actually ensuring that you are knowledgeable, that you're an expert in the area on which you want to fight back. It's easier to do that from a factual place as opposed to an emotional place, right? So I can tell you that in the 90-year history of the Academy, there have been 4 women who have been nominated for Best Director, and only one has won, right? And you cannot tell me that with approximately 300 films that come out each year for 90 years, do that math, it's like 27,000 films, that there has not been more than one female director worthy of an Oscar. So the best way to combat ignorance, prejudice, bigotry, whatever ism you need to use, is to do so from a place of fact. So that way you can shut people down. If they want to scream and yell at you, that's fine, but you know what the facts are, and it's hard to fight when the information is purely factual as opposed to emotional. Who else? Really? I was that good? Is that possible?
In your experience, how has social media changed the pursuit of justice since the time of Martin Luther King Jr.? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of that?
Great question. So obviously there was no internet, there was no social media 50 years ago. And so if you wanted to find out about the next protest or whatever, you would either have to see a flyer on a tree, you would have to read probably a black-owned newspaper, of which there were very few now, or you'd have to wait until Sunday, right, and get the information at church, probably during the announcements. Here, what we have with social media is an immediate ability to galvanize people from all across the country. And we've seen it happen incredibly successfully. The Black Lives Matter movement, the Women's March, the Muslim ban protests, right? And so what I think is that we're in a much better place than we were 50 years ago with respect to that, because it's easier to get the information out there. You know, back in the day, you didn't really care what was going on in Detroit if you lived in St. Louis, because there was a really good chance that you couldn't get off from school or you couldn't get off from work, or things were happening too quickly that you just couldn't get there in time, right? Now, with social media, you have a little bit more time to plan, because the information is out there sooner and it's more accurate. And you can maybe find something in your area or start your own. You know, and I think that's a lot of the power that we have. So if there wasn't a Women's March in your particular city, you could start one and link it to all the others, right? It wasn't as easy to do that back in the day. And so I think that social media helps. You know, it is one tool in the arsenal, right? Just as physical protest, boots on the ground, are another tool in the arsenal. They all work together. Very rarely can you do just one without the other. But I think that we are at a distinct advantage now. And I also think that having young people be in charge is where we need to be, right? So the song says, you know, I believe that children are our future. And that's awesome, but that means that millennials, you guys in the room, are the present, right? So it is up to you, it is incumbent on you to decide whatever that issue is that really, you know, that you're passionate about, and to follow that passion. It's also up to people of my generation, the seasoned folks, to get out of your way and listen to you. You know, I think that we see in Congress a lot of times, you know, folks get in there and they become sort of complacent, right? And then, especially in the House of Representatives, where they have to be reelected every 2 years, it's more about saving their space than making sure that they are doing what's best for their constituents. And that's unfortunate, because they literally forget where they came from. And that means that they're not listening to the ideas of the younger generation. And that means you guys. And so things that should be happening aren't happening, right? And so we can talk about how I think the older generation can be counsel to millennials, to the current generation. You know, talk to them about strategy, talk to them about, you know, where it is that you want to go and what your goals are. Because the struggle, sadly, has not changed that much. Just the tools that we use to fight the struggle, right? And so you can get a lot of wisdom from the seasoned folks, and then ask them to step aside because you're moving faster than they are. And we need to, as these seasoned folks, we need to allow you to do that, you know, and we need to allow you to fall and to stumble, because that's part of the process, right? Nobody gets it perfect. MLK didn't get it perfect. Malcolm X didn't get it perfect. But if you think about it, Fred Hampton, who's a nationally renowned activist, was just 21 when he was murdered, right? And so there is no age limit. There is no thing that you have to say, okay, well, I can't start until X particular age. You know, Martin Luther King was 39 when he died. You know, it's relatively young. But what you can do is decide what your issue is, what you're passionate about, and then start reading about it. You know, the other good benefit to having social media and the internet in general now is that, you know, you don't have to wait until a book is available in the library to go read about Nina Simone or Julian Bond or whomever your person is, right? You can just get it on your tablet. It's immediate. So having that technology that they didn't have 50 years, I think, is a benefit. And the only downside are the trolls. But you know, trolls are the same as they were 50 years ago. They're just now online, and it seems to me more cowardly than, you know, actually being in your face about it. Okay. Ask me now. This is your one chance.
So, April, what are some of the other shifts that you are seeing in Hollywood since your hashtag went out here in all the way to January 2018. What are some of those other shifts that you have seen that have happened as a result of that?
Right. There's been some incremental change. I talked about the fact that, the Academy has now made their changes. The BAFTAs, which is the British Arts and Television, I don't know, it's the English equivalent to our Oscars, now has 2 categories in which the nominees have to show a commitment to diversity before they're even nominated. So that's completely new. That's something, and that shows that they also have a commitment to diversity and inclusion. The fact that we're still talking about Oscars So White and these issues 4 years later, I think speaks to the testament of people being interested in these issues. And so, you see Oscars So White used in a variety of ways, and it's nearly every award show at this point, so now we get Grammy So White, or we get, Tony So White, or whatever the case may be. But what we also know is that studios, film studios, TV networks, and independent smaller producers, like for example, J.J. Abrams, who does a lot of TV and film, has now committed to increasing the diversity and inclusion on his sets for the shows that he does. And that's important because I have always said that diversity and inclusion need to happen on both sides of the camera, right? So it's fantastic to see more faces of people from traditionally underrepresented communities. And Oscars So White has never been binary. It's never been just a black thing. It's always been about people who are underrepresented. And so that means the LGBT plus community. So for example, why is it that in 2018, we still have never had a rom-com between 2 LGBT people, right? Why is that? Why is it that we can have the fantastic Sir Patrick Stewart playing a disabled superhero in the X-Men franchise, but we've never had a disabled person playing a superhero? Why is it that although every now and again we get films that reflect the black experience, the vast majority of them over the last decade or 2 have been slave movies. And I have slave fatigue. Like, I get it. Slavery was bad. Thank you. I don't need to pay $15 for you to tell me that yet again. So where are the movies about us just being us? And where are all the movies for the Latinx community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community? How is it that you decide that Matt Damon is going to come into a country of 1 billion Chinese people and attempt to save them from the, I don't even know what it was, the aliens, the monsters, the whatever, as opposed to having an Asian or Asian American man save his own people, right? Why do we need to continue to have these white savior tropes? And so the progress has been incremental. But what I know is that in speaking to people who have become Academy members since 2015, it's making a difference on the inside too. Because if you think about it, last year, 4 of the 5 movies nominated for Best Documentary Oscar were movies that reflected the experiences of people of color. That's 80%. And that's never been done before. So the change is small, but it's important, and it will keep going. Now, I can tell you that the nominations drop in 2 weeks? No, next week, next week, on Monday. And it's going to be Oscars So White 3.0, or 4. I don't even know where we are now. But it's going to be Oscars So White again. Because if you think about the movies that we've had in the last year, they have not been representative of the people in this room. And that's the goal, that everybody should be able to see themselves on screen, not just during Oscar season, but all year long. And we also know that representation matters, and it sells well. The more diverse a movie is, the more money it's going to make, right? So nobody would call, for example, the Fast and Furious franchise a multicultural film, right? But if you think about who the leads are, Tyrese, who can't keep his mouth shut, Vin Diesel, The Rock, a couple of women leads, an Asian American lead, right? It is the most diverse franchise in history, but nobody thinks about it that way. If you think about Star Wars, you have a woman lead in Daisy Ridley. You have John Boyega, I think that's me, sorry. You have John Boyega, and you have Oscar, who is a black man, and you have Oscar Isaac, right, who is a Latinx man. But nobody's gonna call that a multicultural film because it's just a good film. And that's the way that we need to think about all film, all entertainment. You know, Hamilton is a fantastic example, right? Hamilton was the most multicultural cast ever in the history of Broadway. And yet the following year, the people of color and the people from marginalized communities were still beating their heads against the wall trying to get their plays on Broadway. Not many people know that all of the theaters on Broadway are owned by 4 families. That sounds very mafia. 4 organizations, right? 4. And they are ensconced in their positions. And the problem is, we need to think outside of our box, all of us, because we all have implicit biases, right? And that's not racist or sexist or whatever, that's just real, and that's okay. It's, I have them, you have them, and that's absolutely fine. It's what you do with them that makes a difference. So if you're going to decide that you're going to cast for a Broadway show, but you're not going to think, why couldn't this person be played by an Asian American man? Or why couldn't it, you know, why couldn't this male character be switched up and now played by a woman? If you stay where you are, you're not going to grow, and your people aren't going to grow. You know, if you think about, for example, Coco this year, the animated film about a little Mexican kid who plays his guitar for ghosts. Now, we had never heard of Coco before, right? Brand new character. And yet, for 3 weekends straight, Coco outperformed the Justice League movie. I don't even know what it was called. But this movie had Batman, Superman, like Batman, Wonder Woman. Everybody was in this film. Everybody that we had grown up with for decades and knew very well. And yet Coco outperformed. Why is that? Because it was something new, because it was a fantastic story that was told well, and because it was a movie that reflected the community, right? The Latinx community is the largest growing community in this country. So why is it that we don't have enough movies that reflect their experiences? You know, I had to go all the way back to like Edward James Olmos in Stand By Me, you know, to think about a movie with the Latinx population, and that's wrong, right? Because their experiences are just like our experiences, and when they're not, we need to be celebrating their experiences as well. So I would encourage you, you know, if you're thinking about entertainment, step outside of your own box a little bit and go see a movie that you wouldn't normally, just to broaden your horizons a little bit, because it's worth it. And if you don't like it, I mean, it was $10, so it was basically, you know, the cost of a Starbucks coffee or whatever. But if you do like it, that means that it's going to broaden your mind to maybe read more, go see more, do more. You guys pay $10 for Starbucks. You know you do. I have no idea what time it is.
Maybe one more question.
So when you created Stop the Fight, that's a hashtag that has kind of a conclusion. Mm-hmm. But for something like Oscars So White, and you're really shining a spotlight on an issue, and I'm sure you didn't anticipate this viral success of that, how do you stay involved, and do you stay involved, and what's your kind of role in that moving forward? Excellent question.
I'm a party of one, right? So I am the, if anybody says they're on Oscars So White, they lie. It's just me. And it has just been me, you know, for the past 3 or 4 years. But I was in a very privileged place. You know, when I created Oscars So White, I was going to work as an attorney. I was still actively practicing. And then this thing took off like I never could have imagined, and I realized that I loved it. I was also in a place at work that, I mean, I hated my job. Like, it was comfortable, and it paid me a lot of money, and I was just basically doing whatever I needed to do to get paid, but there was no passion, there was no creativity. So I had already started moving outside of that and finding an avocation to sort of feed my creativity, because I wasn't getting it at work. And so I became the managing editor of Broadway Black. At least initially, I was a writer, and I was doing that at the same time. Oscar So White took off, and I realized that it was my calling to champion this cause. And so I had a really interesting conversation with my husband and said, okay, it's going to mean that I'm traveling more, I'm making less, but I will be happy. What do you think? And he, to his credit, kissed me on my cheek and then gave me a parachute and said, go do your thing. And that was it. And I quit my job. Not everybody can do that. I fully recognize my privilege in being able to switch my careers at, in my mid-40s. Oscar So White was 2015, so I was 44 at the time. Not everybody can do that. And so I recognize my privilege in being able to do so and still being able to, contribute to the college fund for my kids, make sure that the mortgage is paid, and all the rest of that stuff. But online, it's difficult because if you still have a regular 9-to-5, you have to fit it in. But if you are the face of a campaign or a movement or a cause or whatever you want to call it, be consistent. So if your followers know that on Wednesdays from 3 to 5, you're going to be talking about nothing but whatever that cause is, then that's your thing, right? Perhaps you can't be on social media every single day. I'm addicted to Twitter. The fact that my phone is not in my hands just reflects how much I love you people, because you don't know, but I'm like this on the inside going, okay, something's going on Twitter and I'm missing it. It's like FOMO to the nth degree. But you have to be consistent, and you have to ensure that people know where and when they can find you. And for me, it wasn't just social media. I practiced law for nearly 20 years, and I'm a really good writer, like really good. And so I wrote initially on blogs, but then I pitched, and I had the Washington Post and The Guardian and Forbes and other, well-known publications reaching out to me to ask me to write about Oscar So White. And so on those days when I couldn't be on Twitter, I could send folks to my writings so that they still knew what was going on. And so when I came back, they were fully in the know. I also did, a bazillion interviews. I'm doing one, a lady called, she sent me an email. I was sleeping. The email came at 4:30 this morning. And she said, hey, just read your piece about MLK for the History Channel, and was wondering if you could do our news program tonight, radio program. I said, okay. And then the last line, she says, it's on from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Central Time. Now, come on, girl. But I'm going to do it, right? Because what it means for me is that I have to be up at 12:30, but it also means that I get to reach an audience that I might not otherwise. Now, who's up at 12:30 a.m. listening to public radio? I don't know. But if it's one or two people that I can reach with my words about struggle and justice and liberation and whatever it is that she wants to talk about, then that's worth the half hour for me, right? And so that's it. I think you have to be consistent. I think you have to have multi-levels of information so that you can reach, people at all times of the day and night. Because remember, social media is international, right? I have, last year, middle of September, I traveled to Ghana for the first time. I was in Africa because of a hashtag. Like, that's insane. I need you to understand, they flew me to Ghana because I had created a hashtag. That's insane. I'm going to be at the TED Talk conference in, I don't know, some Canadian city, Vancouver, Toronto, something, in a couple of months because of social media. I'm not saying that this needs to be your job, and it's not even technically my job anymore. I do have a 9-to-5 now, which is completely different. But what has happened to me on social media has led me to being the happiest that I've ever been professionally. And so especially for the younger folks in this room, I will leave you with, find your passion, find it early, right? I am 47 years old. I look phenomenal, yes. However, I would not say to you that you should wait until your mid-40s to figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, right? Do it now. Figure out what that thing is that you would do for free. Don't do it for free. Do not give away your labor for any reason, for anything, right? Don't do it for free. But what is that thing that makes you smile? For me, it's diversity and inclusion in entertainment. It's getting more marginalized people jobs, right? And so literally that is my job now, to do that. And I'm incredibly happy. But everybody says on Sunday nights, oh my God, I have to get up and go to work tomorrow. I have to get up and go to school. I don't want to do it. I actually look forward to Mondays because I love what I do, right? Get to that place. Get to the place where it doesn't matter if you have to work on weekends, right? Even if it means that you aren't making as much as you thought you would, because I can assure you that the happiness that you feel on the inside will balance everything else out. As long as you can get your bills paid and you need to hustle to do that, then do that thing. Because I think the time is short, right? And we should not be unhappy. When I was in high school, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, if you wanted to be a professional woman, you had to either be a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. That was basically it, right? And so I decided I was going to be a lawyer because I talk a lot, I love to argue, and I write well. That just made sense, right? Didn't want to do anything related to blood, and so doctor was out. You get the picture. But now, you can be anything that you want to be. You can literally create your own job title. I mean, I think my old business cards say digital media consultant. What is that, right? That sounds fantastic, and yeah, it sort of describes what I do, but that didn't exist before social media, and that's one of the wonderful things about the internet, that you can literally be anything that you want to be. You just have to be an expert at whatever it is. So I leave you with that, I think. Domingo's going to say yes.
You guys give a big round of applause.
Oh, yes.
April from Grand Rapids Community College. Something to remember us by. That book, our college just celebrated a 100-year anniversary. That book tells a story about our college, but there's also a shirt there that we would love to see you wear. Oh, I know tonight I'll see you. I'll see you tonight at the event, yes. And that'd be great. I know the other presidents would be ticked. I really don't care.
You're causing drama. Why would
That's
you do
okay.
that?
That's okay, because
Okay.
I know you are about social justice, and you don't mind wallowing in the drama a little bit, right?
No pressure, though.
No,
pressure.
none at all. Although if I saw a picture on social media with you on, I would be happy with that.
I feel you. Okay. We can
You guys, one more round of applause, please. Thank you. As I mentioned, you can listen to April again this evening at the MLK's community celebration at Fountain Street Church. Starts at 6 o'clock. Hope to see you guys there. I love what you said. It's that mixture as you find your passion and you're able to grab your gift and see where those two intersect. I always call that your sweet spot, because that's what you hear from April. The passion, and then she has the incredible gift of writing and of communication. And when she was able to put that passion with that gift, that's the sweet spot. And that makes it where, as you said, as long as you can pay the bills, it does not matter what the day looks like. Monday, Sunday, doesn't matter. You love doing what you do. So thank you for that message. Thank you guys for being here today. Please, as you walk out, I think there's probably still some food on that table back. I do not want to walk out there and see food still on that table. Please take some, put it in your pocket. Well, maybe not in your pocket, but take it out with you. Enjoy what we provide out there. Be careful outside, and I hope to see you this evening. Thank you very much.